Okay, so we're going to be in 2 Corinthians 4, 1 through 12. I do just want to do a quick recap. If you've been with us throughout 2 Corinthians, this is Paul's letter. Yesterday, he's just kind of continuing to back up his apostleship, kind of his call that is from God, because there were people criticizing him. And that's kind of a reality, right? You're always going to have the haters. You're always going to have people kind of criticizing and watching for what you're doing wrong. And Paul really dealt with that a lot. But something that I love about Paul is the way that he just reasons with people, and he, kind of lays out the truth. And these are people that he cared deeply and intensely about. He planted this church and he was invested in this church. And these false people, false teachers were coming in and just trying to cause division between him and the people that he loved and cared about, and people that he was leading to Christ. And so that was a big deal. And I just love the way that he's just very factual, very straight up. And I just think about, the way that I would deal with people that are criticizing me, right? I just want to kind of pop off in the flesh a little bit, but I love the way that Paul is just kind of speaking truth and just stays in the spirit about it. So I love that. But that's really kind of what he was doing the last chapter. And towards the end, kind of in verses 12, really through the end, it was about the Old Testament glory versus the New Testament glory. And does anybody remember what the difference was? Just anything stick out to you?
It was more religious and law
Yeah.
in the Old Testament, and now we have the Spirit after Jesus.
Yep. So Shannon said that it was more religion and law in the Old Testament, and now it's more about the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. And a lot of what I thought about too with Moses and the veil is really symbolic about how the glory fades, right? Because in the Old Testament, it was more based on human works, and we just can't maintain that, right? It's a fading glory. And now moving into the New Testament, it really is about his spirit, and his spirit does not fade. His spirit is the one within us, producing fruit. Let me let this person in. Producing fruit and producing change within us. And I'm just going to read 16 through 18 because it's really good and it leads into the chapter we're in. But it says, "But whenever someone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. For the Lord is the Spirit, and wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." So all of us who have had that veil removed can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we're changed into his image. And so just that reality that with the Spirit, there is freedom. And what does the world say that freedom is? What did you think freedom was before you came and learned about Jesus?
Doing whatever.
Doing whatever you want, right? Like I'm free. I get to do what I want to do. And where did that really lead us though? Right? That led us into slavery to those wants that we thought we were free to make. And Romans really talks a lot about that. Like when I'm obeying my want, that want becomes my master. And so, you come to the Lord and we really have to unlearn that, because true freedom is doing what I ought to do, not what I want. Like I now have the freedom and ability to do what I should do. And I always add this piece, and to flourish in that. Like there's a flourishing that comes from obeying the Lord. And now with the Spirit, we have that ability to do that. So I just love how that was all wrapped up in those ending verses. Just how we have the freedom to now see and reflect the glory of the Lord, and that his Spirit is making us more like him. So we can move right into 2 Corinthians 4. I'll read verse 1, and then I want to break some things down. So it says, "Therefore, since God in his mercy has given us, Paul and his coworkers, this new way, we never give up." So just stopping even in that first verse, there's a couple things that stick out to me. And Paul really recognizes two truths in this. In the New King James Version, instead of saying God has given us this new way, it says that God has given us this ministry, right? So the first thing that Paul recognizes is that his ministry is from God, right? It's from God, it belongs to God. We could even say his call, or even this season, um, it belongs to God and it's from God. And so I always stop and ask self-reflective questions. So a question there would be, do I believe that about my current season or my current ministry? Like, do I really believe that where I am right now is from God and that it belongs to God? And so that involves timing, right? Do I believe that I am where I am because God wants me here and I'm going to be there for the amount of time that God wants me in it? So that's the first truth that Paul recognizes. And the second is that this ministry is a mercy from God. It says that since God in his mercy has given us this ministry, right? It's a mercy. Somebody tell me what mercy is. I think we say this all the time, but does anybody remember?
Not getting what you deserve.
Right, not getting what you deserve. So grace is getting the good that you get that you don't deserve, but mercy is not getting what you actually deserve. And so to me, there's so much humility in that because you almost have to recognize what you actually deserve, right? And we kind of live in a culture that has that flipped, right? There's a lot of kind of entitlement and not a right understanding of what we actually deserve. And the funny thing is really when you get in God's presence, if you look throughout the word, when you see people get in his presence, there's two things that they recognize immediately. The first thing is the holiness of God. The second thing is their own unworthiness. But his heart is so evident too, so that you can come to those conclusions and actually like come out grateful for it. If you look at Jeremiah and Isaiah, even Peter, if you go look at when those men got called, there was a recognition of, whoa, like I am not like you. Like you are holy, you are sinless, and you are perfect. And me, I'm unholy. Like you start to see your unworthiness, but God is so quick after that to say, like, I want you though. Like, yes, I need you to come to that understanding so that now I can do things with your life. Right. We almost have to come to that end. And Moses is another example of really having to come to the end of himself. And that's when he got the call. And so I don't know, that's pretty powerful. I'm just thinking about recognizing that where we are, just making it personal, even now, it's a mercy, right? It's not a punishment. It's really not a burden. And when we start to think it is punishment, a burden, like too much, that's the enemy's has a seat, right? The enemy has a seat at your table. If anybody hasn't heard that teaching, it's by Louis Giglio. It's really good. And it really just kind of breaks down recognizing when you're sitting with the Lord and with the Father, and then the enemy sneaks up and sits down, and he can start whispering things and twisting your perception and your perspective, and you don't even realize it until all of a sudden you're frustrated, you're irritated, people are annoying, and the enemy has sat down and you've been conversating and you didn't even realize that's what was going on. So I love that Paul stops and really recognizes that his ministry was a mercy, right? It's a gift. And so just kind of looking at these two truths, I wrote, how did these two truths affect Paul? And I just looked at the last four words in that verse. We never give up, right? We never give up. And how is he able to not give up? When I look at what he states, he's saying this ministry is from God, it belongs to God, it's God's mercy, right? Who's magnified in his mindset? It's Christ, right? And so because of that, he was able to not give up. And I kind of was self-reflecting a little bit and asking why have we given up in the past before? Like there's been times I'm sure even before you knew the Lord, when you were maybe going in a positive direction, but you gave up. And you know, without the Lord, you really don't have the power. Like sin really does have such a pull and kind of authority over you that you kind of fall and everything crumbles and then you're in shame and you've got all this and you're kind of overpowered. But what about when you know the Lord? Like, has anybody known the Lord, been walking, and then you gave up? Okay, so what, just say like a couple things, like why you think
Not having trust in it.
not having full trust. Yep. That's a good one. I'll read what I put. So, kind of like Shannon said, striving in my strength. I wanted to do it my way, right? I wanted things to happen in my time. Like I wanted to push the timeline because I have my goal that I want to get to, right? Me, my, I, self. And that really can cause you to fall. And so I think that's really important, just always looking at what Paul is magnifying, and it's always God, recognizing that where I am is because God wants me here, and for the timing that he wants me here, and that it is a mercy and it is a grace that we get to be in this season. And even just recapping to what we just read, the end of Second Corinthians 3, just talking about the Spirit, right? Wanting him to be the strength, wanting to trust in his time and not just push forward with my plan is really important. So I'll just keep going into verse 2. It says, "We reject all shameful deeds and underhanded methods. We don't try to trick anyone or distort the word of God. We tell the truth before God, and all who are honest know this." So in the New King James, I like the wording a little bit better because it says that we renounce the hidden things of shame. And that's huge because typically when we are hiding things, we're probably ashamed of the things that we're hiding, right? And the enemy really has room to play when we do that. And also, I want to just say the definition of renounce, because in this version it says reject, but in the New King James Version it says renounce. And to renounce is to formally declare one's abandonment. So I'm formally declaring, like, I'm abandoning those old things. I am no longer going to identify with those. I'm done with them. I'm abandoning them. And then I loved the end of that sentence. It says, "We tell the truth before God, and all who are honest know this." And that is just like a breath of fresh air to me. Like, it's so refreshing to live in truth. You guys remember like lying about one thing, and then all of a sudden you're having to lie to like protect that thing, and all of a sudden like you have this whole other identity in life that's not real. And then you forget what the real one was because you've been living in this one so long and you start to feel crazy. Like that's, I get that, and I'm sure you guys do, but it's so relieving to just to be done with the lies, have God teach you how to just be one person and to live in that truth. And I just thought about that, how there's freedom and truth. And I thought about Matthew 5. I'll turn there and just read this because it's an account of a woman who has been struggling for 12 years. Okay, this is Matthew 5:25. Is that right? Mark, just kidding. Mark. Hold on. Okay, yeah, Mark 5. So it's about a woman. She had been struggling with the flow of blood for 12 years. And, in that culture, that pretty much means you were outcasted, right? She's been outcasted. Nobody was allowed to touch her. So she had gone probably without human touch for 12 years, which is, really unhealthy and not good for us. So she had been suffering. And not only had she been suffering, but she spent everything she had trying to get better, and not only did she not get better, but she was getting worse. And so, stepping into her shoes, like how depressing and isolating that was. That was something that was out of her control. And it was really causing her to live isolated and probably in shame and all of that. And you know, she had heard about the Lord, I'm sure. And in verse 27, it says that when she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said within herself, if I only may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. And so stepping into that story, there's crowds of people. She's on the ground. She's just talking within herself. If I can just get to him, right? If I can just touch, I just want to touch it. I can slither away and kind of like see if it worked. And and it says that right when she touched him, the fountain of blood was dried up and she felt in her body that she was healed. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, he turned and basically was asking, who touched me? And his disciples are next to him and saying, what do you mean, who touched you? Everybody's touching you, right? We're in a crowd. And he said, no, this was different, right? It says, verse 32, and he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, she came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. So that is powerful. Like she came before him and this was a risk, and it wasn't about what everybody else was thinking, what people's opinions were. She was looking at him and she fell before him and told him the whole truth, and not knowing what his response was going to be. In verse 34, he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. And so this is just a good section to spend a little personal time with the Lord, because he didn't just want like a quick in and out fix healing. This was about personal connection for him. Like he wanted that moment with her. And I think that just the evidence of her coming forward and telling the whole truth is powerful, because she was doing it for him and she was telling to him. And so, flipping back here to Second Corinthians, just reading that, Paul being like, we tell the whole truth before God. Like that was a lifestyle that Paul lived. It came naturally from him because he chose to live in truth before God, and therefore he lived in truth before others. And somebody said this quote years ago, and I don't know where it's from, but it always stuck with me. But it's that honesty is the soil from which intimacy grows. And that is so true. Like, honesty is the soil from which intimacy grows. And when I want to grow intimacy and personal connection with Christ, I want to come to him honest. It's not about putting on what I think he wants to see. Like he sees it anyway. It's about pouring out the raw, like everything, just pouring it out to him, because I want to grow that intimate relationship. So I'll repeat that one more time. Honesty is the soil from which intimacy grows. And I love that Paul is just saying, that's just part of Paul's lifestyle, right? He's saying we tell the truth before God, and therefore everybody who's honest knows this. He's kind of speaking that to the people that are criticizing and questioning him too. And so let me go to verse 3. It says, if the good news we preach is hidden behind a veil, it is hidden only from people who are perishing. Satan, who is the god of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. They don't understand the message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. And so yesterday, kind of broke down about the veil, but it is important. Paul said not to be ignorant of Satan's schemes, and it is important to recognize that the enemy has been given influence over this world for a time, and there is a level of spiritual blindness that he is responsible for that prevents people from coming to understanding and coming to repentance. But I wanted to go to John 3 19 through 21, because that although the enemy does do his part, like we all as humans have free will, we have our part too. So if we could read that.
This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of the light because of their deeds, and they were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So, this verse is just calling us out kind of as humans, right? Men loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. And for everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light lest his deeds should be exposed. And this is a little bit random, but this is just what popped into my head. But this is almost like in the morning when I wake the blue room up. Like you guys are like in your little your little darkness, and I'm like, morning, bang, turn that light on, and everybody's like slithering back down. And I only do that, by the way, because I have to in that room. So I don't enjoy it, but that's just what they need. But that is kind of like that. Like when you're living in that darkness and you've got Christians coming in with their light, you're kind of like, because it kind of points out to you your own darkness and your own sin when you're seeing somebody walk in light, right? But really the point of why I wanted to read that is because Satan does blind, and there is a spiritual part to that. But also my actions affect my affections. So here in verse 19 says that men loved the darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil and they were practicing evil, right? So, you know, I when I was loving darkness, I was my deeds like that, what I was choosing, my actions were affecting my affections, and it was affecting my heart. But verse 21 says, but he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, that they have been done in God. And so just that difference, and that's really good to remember, because now, when you come to the Lord and you kind of have a clean slate, there's going to be points where you want to start, that's almost tested, and you want to start kind of hiding and doing things you're not supposed to do. That's a really good check to where when you start noticing yourself doing that, that's like that red flag. You need to kind of train yourself to notice those red flags. And when you get convicted, like really listen to those convictions, because that's how you can tune into the Lord's voice more. If I'm blowing by conviction and I'm still praying for the Lord to like help and empower me, like just don't get deceived. You know what I mean? Like if I'm praying for his help and power, like, and he's convicting me, I should be obeying that conviction, because that is an answer to my prayer. So, yeah, it's just really good to pay attention to. And I also thought about, I haven't brought the identity chart out in a while, so I just think I should. I used to do it every couple months, but it's been a while. So, but this really kind of breaks down, and this really helped me too with identity, because I'm kind of a visual person. So when I have something to look at, that just kind of helps. So in the world, right, my feelings and my desires really dictated my actions, right? And so repeated actions create a lifestyle, and that lifestyle became my identity. That's really what I identified with. So when my feelings came up, that's really, I kind of linked my feelings and my identity together, because everything just led one to another. I don't know if people, I think that shows up the right way, doesn't it? Maybe it's backwards. I don't know. Get my number. I'll have to text it to you. But anyway, so this is how we operated in the world. And my feelings and desires were really kind of influenced by everything going on in the world and culture and everything else. But when I come to the Lord, everything about this flips. This arrangement flips the other way. So now in the Lord, I get my identity from what his word says. And based off of his identity, the identity God says I have, I create a lifestyle because that's what's dictating my actions. And then my feelings and my desires follow. Like they will follow my actions. And so sometimes that's why we can't feel our way into Christianity, right? Because one day I feel like a Christian, next day I feel like I'm back in sin, right? But we have to base where I am off of what God says. And, so this is a really good chart. And I also just wrote that this is being empowered by his spirit. So this isn't just like positive thinking. This is literally getting what God says, and that's my identity. That's okay. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways you can apply this. I guess an example could be if I wake up and I'm just used to kind of going by my feelings. If I wake up and I'm just tired and kind of sad, because sometimes that happens, and I don't get out of bed today because I just feel sad. And so I'm just not going to get out of bed. And if I habitually do that, like that just becomes what I do. Like that just becomes the sadness just takes over and it has power over me. Right. But now when I'm in the Lord, like if I get up and I'm sad, I I'm getting up and doing devos. Like you know what I'm saying? Like some of these actions you've got to put into place, and the Lord helps you kind of deal with that differently. And so instead of just not getting up and allowing those feelings to take over, I'm getting up and nope, the Lord says I belong to him. God says that he can strengthen me, and he gives me the strength to do what he's set out today. And then as I do that, you'll find, I mean, not always, like sometimes you have a sad day, but you'll find that a lot of that like gets in line. Like when I'm living according to what God says, um, a lot of that gets in line, and I don't become my feelings or my desires. So that can just apply in a lot of ways, but that really helped me in the beginning of my walk. And let me get back to Second Corinthians. So just thinking about how Satan blinds. So that's a question I wrote down. Like, yes, we have our part, but there is a spiritual aspect to it. And so looking around the world, how does Satan try to blind people and keep them blind? If you just have a couple things that come to mind when you look around. Or is everybody so everybody's seeing?
Division.
Division, yeah. Division between people, definitely. Deception is strong, and we know that Satan is the king of deception, right? I wrote down two categories, external and internal. So I look around, and this is probably the most intoxicated we've all been, right? Substance abuse. I see that the enemy wants to blind and keep people blind by having them intoxicated. I put distracting minds with media, everything that the media is screaming and the culture is influencing, and lies. And internally, I just kind of put emotions, even like the enemy can play off of emotions and kind of blow them up and keep people blinded by what they're feeling. I put fear, shame are huge ones. And then I even just put, this is general, but a self lens. Like, the devil can just kind of slip a mirror in front of your face and you don't even realize, and you're looking at everything by how does this affect me, and just getting so self-focused and self-consumed that it's blinding you away from God. So those are just a couple things I wrote down. And then of course I wrote, how does he try to blind me, like personally and specifically? Like what are things that the enemy does to blind me from the Lord, or from what the Lord wants to do, or even from God's work that I could be doing? What are the ways that he tries to blind me? And really a lot of it is the same, but I think that's a good thing to identify. We do an idol study here that is awesome. It's gospel treason, and kind of helps you to identify those things. And it talks about the sin beneath the sin. And so kind of looking underneath that and identifying the idol that tends to blind you, is it says that idolatry blinds and binds you. So it keeps you blinded and keeps you kind of enslaved. And this is everything the enemy tries to do, to hold you back from the Lord. And so just kind of going on, says that they don't understand this message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. And I guess the last thing I'll just say on that is that is important and relevant to us, because we need to see the influence behind unbelief. And so even like, especially, I think it helps to grow compassion for others. I always hear the line, hate the sin and love the sinner. And that really is real. Like, you really gotta, people aren't our enemy. You gotta look kind of behind at what's influencing the evil. And I think it helps to shape our prayers too, definitely. Kind of praying that God would open eyes, and praying against what we see people enslaved with. So it kind of helps to, when we recognize that truth, it helps us to have more compassion towards others, helps us to identify kind of the enemy in people's lives, and then it helps us be intentional with our own hearts, because I don't want to always just see how this is affecting others. It's like me, I need to be intentional with my heart, and I don't want to let the enemy have any kind of influence over what I'm doing and saying. So verse 5 says, you see, we don't go around preaching about ourselves. We preach that Jesus Christ is Lord, and we ourselves are your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let there be light in the darkness, has made this light shine in our hearts, so we could know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. And I love that Paul is saying, listen, this isn't about me, right? We're not preaching about our ability or our strength or anything that comes from us. We're preaching Jesus. And when he says right here, we ourselves are your servants for Jesus' sake, is such a good, it's such a good example of Paul saying, I'm serving you like for the Lord. And that's a good way to not get burnt out, right? Because if we serve people for people, we it's it's just not lasting. Like, it just won't last. And so one question is, do I even serve others? Am I a servant? Do I serve? Do I look for ways that I can help? And then the next question is, why am I serving? And God is so faithful, right? He will challenge our motives so that he can correct our thinking. And motives are something that we can either get too analytical about, or just not analytical enough. It's one of those things where if I'm prayerful, like, God's going to show me, right? I don't have to sit there and over examine to make sure I'm doing everything out of a right motive. It's just a good thing to check. And God is faithful. Like, he will challenge that, and he will bring us to those places where sometimes I notice, like, he'll let me get frustrated and annoyed, and my flesh coming out, and then you really have to stop and say, okay, wait, I'm doing this for you, Lord, right? I'm serving for you. And I know he's blessed by that. And in verse 6, where it says, God, who said, let there be light in the darkness, has made this light shine in our hearts so we could know the glory of God. And I, of course, thought about Genesis. So let me just come back to the beginning. Okay, so Genesis 1, and I'll just read the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And that is just the power of his voice. Like, so that word God created is bara, and one of our candles that we sell is called bara, but that's really um, kind of one of the places that it's from, and it means to create something out of nothing, and that's something only God can do. Okay, is to speak and to create something out of nothing, and that is mind blowing. That actually is really deep if you stop and think about that. The fact that God can create something that wasn't there. It's not reshaping or reforming. He is literally creating something new out of nothing. And this is where we could read Psalm 51:10, because it's that same word is used in this verse.
Okay.
Yeah.
1 second.
Okay.
Create in me a clean heart, O God, renew a loyal spirit within me.
Yes, perfect. Create in me a clean heart, oh God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. And that is so encouraging, especially when you really like you're walking in truth and you're starting to see your heart. It's not good, right? There's some sketchy stuff in there. There's some stuff that comes up that, that are kind of shameful. Like you don't want it to be there, but it is. And this is one of those verses where God could do that. He can create a clean heart where there was not a clean heart. And so that is just really encouraging, and just thinking about the power of his voice. Okay, let me keep going. So verse 7, we now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves. And yeah, just I love that word treasure. Paul is always kind of saying, it's not about me. It's really about Christ, and we really are. And that almost takes the pressure off when you realize it's not about you. Like we're just the vessel. And I thought about that word treasure because when I treasure something, it has value to me. It has worth. It means something. Like I just kept thinking about how it has value. And I think, once you've been around the word so much, or maybe you have a lot of knowledge, like we just don't want to get callous to that it is a treasure. Like there's people in the world walking around lost and broken that need what we have, right? They need the Lord. They need to see Christ shining through us. And so it's just even more kind of motivation for, I know me personally, it's like, just kind of get over yourself, right? It's not about me. It's about Christ, and he is the substance. So who's getting the attention, right? Am I giving him the attention, or am I taking it? Because once you do start walking and God is changing you and you have those fruits of the spirit, like it is going to naturally attract people. And so am I keeping that? Like am I keeping the attention, or am I quick to make sure that, yeah, this is from God, right? This is the Lord. Anything good you see in me is the Lord. And so just making sure that when people are drawn to the truth that is in you, like recognize and remember where it came from, and be quick to make sure that God gets the glory for that. Okay, so verses 8 through 10, we're going to spend a little time on. And even before I read it, I just want everyone to be thinking about how this is Paul's perspective on his suffering. Like this is really how he was seeing his suffering. He acknowledges like the reality of it, but he always kind of switches. You could just tell that his mindset is eternal when he was walking through his suffering. So it says that we are pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We are perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. So you hear just how eternal that is, like how he's so set on like this is worth it. Like the everything that he was walking through and suffering was worth it for Christ. So by keeping his eyes on Jesus, he was able to walk through these horrible things that were happening and able to see the Lord in it. So I have these 4 verses lumped together because they really are battle verses, and part of how we fight warfare is we use the word, right? The word is the sword. And so I just want to go through kind of each thing that he says, and then I'll say the verse that goes with it, because I think we can all relate to the things in not in such a severe way as Paul, but in some way you're going to feel this at some point you're going to feel this way in your walk, and it's important to have a truth to really turn to keep your mind eternal. So this first one, um it says that we're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. And so being pressed on every side, I just think of like every angle being kind of boxed in. And I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm claustrophobic. I wouldn't like put a label on it, but I don't like, I don't enjoy being in a small space where I can't get out. Right. Like, have you ever gotten on an elevator and there's too many people, but you got in there first. And so now they're coming in and you're like, right. There's something about being kind of squeezed in and not being able to get out that's freaky, right? That like we just don't like that. And sometimes you can be in God's will and you want to be in God's will, but you just feel claustrophobic in it. And you can kind of feel pressed together from every side. Like maybe you're worried about your finances, you're worried about this relationship, you're worried about your future. Maybe you have physical things going on. It can be a lot of different things, but you just feel pressed in while you're in God's will. So I wanted to read the Psalm 61, 2-4 verse for that.
From the ends of the earth, I will cry to you for help. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock. Lead me to the towering rock of safety. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so is that it? Okay. Yeah, so that's perfect. From the ends of the earth, I will cry to you. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And then it goes on and says, for you have been a shelter for me. You've been a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in your tabernacle forever, and I will trust in the shelter of your wings. And so, really taking that, like, we can feel pressed down and pressed in and even have that like trapped feeling when you're in God's will, but what are we tempted to do when we feel that? Like what do you feel tempted to do when you feel boxed in?
Fight.
Run. What'd you say?
Fight your way out.
Fight your way out. Right. So fight your way out, run, you want to escape from it. And I think a lot of times, like a lot of us, we're used to kind of being impulsive and just obeying those feelings and just getting out of there. But really, we have to unlearn that and stop and come to scripture like this one. And David felt that way. And he was crying out to the Lord and recognizing, like, my heart is overwhelmed right now. I need you to lead me to the rock that's higher than I. You are my shelter. I will abide in you. I'll trust in the shelter of your wings. And so, and a lot of times for me, I notice if I get that feeling, like by the time that I've prayed this out loud and kind of set my mind on him, if you need to get somebody, like get some prayer, like bring it out into the open, that really helps that feeling to die down. And it really strengthens your faith. Like you just exercised your faith muscle to get a little stronger when you get past that point. So let me read the next one. It says, we are perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. So perplexed. So, sometimes you're going to be in a season, you're perplexed, you're confused, you don't understand why you are where you are, why you're feeling how you're feeling. But Paul says we're not driven to despair. And I think the temptation is to get to despair, right? Especially when you're in God's will, you don't know why God's not a God of confusion, but why am I confused? Type of thing. And so it's tempting to get into that place of despair. So this is where I wanted to read Philippians 4, 6, and 7.
Hey, just a second.
Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so Philippians 4, 6, like be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, like with thanksgiving, come to God, basically. And this isn't, and Paul also wrote Philippians, but this isn't Paul just saying like, don't be anxious, because that's the kind of the last thing an anxious person wants to hear. Like when you're in the middle of anxiety, it's like, oh, don't be anxious. But this really, this isn't just, it's not slapping just a verse on it. It's really slowing down and saying, okay, what is God saying? He's telling me I don't have to be anxious. I need to come to him with this. Like I need to, and I love that it says with thanksgiving, right? Let's get some gratitude in there. Like with thanksgiving, what can I be thankful for? Like what has God done for me? Who is God, his character? Let your requests be made known to God. Like, am I even coming to God with it? And then verse 7 says, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, which means the peace of God, which doesn't even make sense in the moment. It will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So when you're in that, locked into that confused, perplexed state, really stopping, getting in the word and talking to God through it, like processing through it. Get somebody to process through it with you, like get prayer. Unlearning your old way of dealing and relearning with the sword of the truth is how you can find some victory, because we're leaning on the Holy Spirit, talked about in the beginning, right? The Holy Spirit is the one that empowers us. This is really how we can lean on the Lord when you're in the middle of those moments. Okay, let me read the next one. It says, we are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. So Paul was literally hunted down. Like people were looking and trying to physically kill him. But I can replace that with, the enemy. We are hunted by the enemy. Like if you are going to serve the Lord and work for his kingdom, you do have a target on your back. Right. So this is where I wanted to read Isaiah 49, 14 through 17.
But Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, and my Lord has forgotten me. Can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Your sons shall make haste. Your destroyers and those who laid you waste shall go away from you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So if we are hunted down, there is an enemy, right? We know he's evil, but set your mind on Christ, right? What is the Lord saying right here? Because a lot of times in those moments, maybe you can feel like it says in verse 14, the Lord has forsaken me, my Lord has forgotten me. But he promises never to abandon us. And he even says, look, I've inscribed you. You are on the palms of my hands. Like my thoughts are always on you. Psalm 139 is another really good one and just talks about his intimate knowledge of us. And it's just him saying, like, how could I forget about you? Right? I've done everything for you. I love you. Psalm 23 says we go through the valley of the shadow of death. He's going to get us through it. And he's not going to abandon us in those moments that the enemy is trying to get us down. Okay, the last one says we get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. And so John 10, 27 through 29. Oh, hi.
on 10.
20.
My sheep listen to my voice, I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all. No one oh, wow. It's greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand.
Perfect. Yeah, and so like Paul said, says that we get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. So even when you get knocked down, right? What am I doing in that? Like, even if I do fail or, whatever, here's the reality. My sheep hear my voice. I know them. They follow me, and no one can snatch us out of God's hand. Right? The enemy can lie and we can, have our shame, but remembering that we're in his hand and his grip is stronger on us than ours is on him. And so those are just some good battle verses, and just really important to, when you're in those moments, like identify what's happening and get the truth in. I will wrap it up here. In verse 11, it says, yes, we live under constant danger of death because we serve Jesus, so that the life of Jesus will be evident in our dying bodies. So we live in the face of death, but this has resulted in eternal life for you. And I was just praying, thinking about that verse last night, because Paul really could say that when he was under constant danger of death, and because of serving Jesus, like it was just worth it to him. And I just thought of the question, what happens when following Jesus involves like sacrifice? And all of us really, we are sacrificing, like, to a degree, something, even being here and seeking him. But it's just a question that's really was on my mind, is what happens when following him involves more sacrifice. And I just look at the world right now, and I think in American Christianity, it's been pretty easy. I mean, we do suffer some persecution, like we might get mocked and called a freak and whatever else, but I just really see God wanting to call people out of the gray area and really answer the call, right? And this is where we can just read the last verse, Luke 9:23-25, because the Lord doesn't sugarcoat the reality of following him. Okay.
Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self?
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so just the Lord bringing that reality and saying, listen, if anybody wants to come after me, you're going to have to deny yourself. Right. And take up your cross and follow. And if you want to save your life, you'll lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. And so just how worth it is, but thinking about Paul and his willingness to just sacrifice everything for the Lord. And the last thing I'll say is just for verse 12. When we live in the face of death, but this has resulted in eternal life for you. I just love that he was still others centered. And I thought about how choosing Christ in the midst of suffering strengthens and benefits others, and how we really strengthen each other. And our faith does have to be tested, but you do want to link up with those people whose faith has been tested, and they have been through hard things and come out with the Lord through it. And so those are just good qualities you want to look for. Okay, I'm done. I can feel her squirming over there. I'm like, I gotta go.
No, you can keep going.
No.
Okay, just really quick. I really want everyone's attention for a minute. Like, I know we sit in a lot of Bible studies and you guys hear a lot of things, but I just really this morning got super overwhelmed and emotional because I think about you guys and how loved you are by God and how he brought you here. And I've been talking to my staff and we've been praying because a lot of you are still stuck and a lot of no freedom, right? And this word today just really hit my heart. And so I want to ask you, like, do you want to change? Do you want freedom? Because if you do, then when we sit in these studies, you're not just going to hear a study and take notes, right? You're going to do more than that. You're going to really choose to go, okay, let's hear what you say. Let's look at my life, Lord, and let's take some of these concepts that we read about, that we hear about, that are in our living room, and help me put them into practice in my life. And so today, man, the first question I would ask myself, because I, like Paul and like Kristin, like the longer you've been walking with the Lord and the more you see and know who he is, and the more you're aware of who you are and who you aren't, you just sit there and you go, God, you were so merciful in finding me and drawing me to you. Like, you shouldn't have. This is Paul, who killed believers. Like, I didn't kill them, but I know what I've done in my life. And he was so merciful, one, to even forgive me and save me, but then to allow me to share that gospel, the thing that is the only life-saving thing in this world, with other people, and to give us the opportunity to serve him and serve you. That's just mercy. He could have picked a whole bunch of other people, right? That would have seemed a whole lot more qualified. But I've done this for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of people give up. A lot of people quit, right? And so Paul, like, I just want to have you write this question down and ask yourself later, right? What would cause me to quit on Christ? You want to know your things. What would cause me to quit? Okay. And once you've identified that thing or things, right? And you don't have to answer it now, but I want you to spend some time with the Lord and do it. Because if you want to have a life change while you're here, and I'm guessing most of you aren't giving up a year of your life to come here to leave the same. And if you want to have victory, then you're going to start asking yourself questions, because this is the stuff we didn't do. We didn't live in reality. We didn't really, and our own perspective was our own reality. So, Lord, what would cause me to give up, to quit on walking with you, right? And the reason you want to know that is because then you want to ask him, write this down too. You want to ask him to help you surrender to him at that place, at the extreme, right? If it's somebody dying in your life, if it's you suffering with an illness, if it's you, whatever your thing is, if I don't get what I want, if it's not my timeline, if you don't bring me a husband in a year, whatever your thing is, then you're going to go, God, help me surrender here. That even if, there's a great song by Mercy Me, I think, or Casting Mercy Me, even if, like, even if, man, you slay me, even if I want to, right? And even if I don't want to, I want to not quit, God, right? Lauren Wong sent me this really cool thing on grace, and I'm going to play it for some of us later. Kristin went exactly where God had me this morning, so I just know his Holy Spirit's at work, right? Here's what the other part is. The enemy of God wants to blind our eyes, right? So some of us, before we came to Christ, told a deception. But what I see now is I see believers who have their minds blinded, their view. When you blind someone, right, you prevent them from seeing. You obstruct their view, okay? You can't see how you could be free. You can't see how you will get out of this. You can't see. And I did the same thing this morning, because one of the, where does he tell you that he blind, like, it's in your minds. Your mind is where he is going to try to mess with you. Hear me. Where's he going to mess with me? In my mind. So your mind is about what you do, what I think. So he's going to mess with what you think. He's going to mess with your perspective, with your thoughts about you. He's going to send you doubts, right? I have a whole list right here, right? And she hit on some of them too. I watched some of you get pummeled in shame constantly. You are so blinded by the truth of who Jesus is and the light of Christ because all you can see is your shame. Some of you, it's your fear. Some of you, it's fear of what's going to happen, what might happen. Some of you, it's what's been done to you. You cannot see past the identity of what's happened to you, right? Some of you, you've been called an addict, right? And it doesn't mean that God's word won't address those things, but those things obscure your view of Christ, right? And I was thinking about, we talked about it the other day, like if I'm always looking in, if I'm always looking at those things that Satan keeps putting right here, keeps shooting fiery darts of doubts, right? Just this week, right? A number of you, I've talked to you, right? And a number of you, thoughts, fears that don't line up with this, that are not what God says. And Satan counts on you listening to him, believing who he tells you you are, believing what fears he says, rather than you trusting God. The antidote right here, the antidote to having your mind blinded, and your vision obscured, and you not being able to see truth, is to believe in Christ. And to believe what he says. Like really believe this over, and it's hard. Please listen, I know I battle it. It's hard when your mind is so loud and your feelings are so loud and your thinking is so loud and it's so what you felt for so long. But God's word says something different, right? The reality. So I just want to keep telling you, like, the way to dispel lies is with truth. Right? That's why Jesus says, I am the truth. I'm the only truth. Everything that's contrary to this is a lie. And so only believing what God says instead of what you think. And please, like today, I just sat here and Paul said, you know what? I preach Jesus. I want to tell you about Jesus. I want to tell you about the love of Christ. I know some of you, I don't know if she's on here, but how desperately we want to be loved. And I just want to tell you about the love of Christ. The love that would pursue you, would rescue you from your slavery and your bondage, even your wrong thinking, would die on a cross for you, then would go get you and draw you to him. And some of you multiple times because you keep running away, and would be so patient with you, who would do anything for you, who wants to lead you, who wants to bless you, who wants to be your Lord, who wants to love you more than anyone. That Jesus, right? I want to tell you about him because I didn't know him when I got here. I didn't know who he was, but I can promise you, and I didn't understand it, how that love could fill my soul. I watched us chase after things. I did it too. Chase after relationships, chase after men, chased after just some of us just want to be noticed. We want to be loved. And I watch you chase it and try to get it in all different kinds of weird ways, right? From men, from women, from others, from your parents. We're chasing after love from earthly people when the one who loves you the most is saying, I'm right here. Let me love you. And so I just, Paul just said, I finally learned it. I just want to tell you, I finally got it. Wasn't my first time, was second time, right? And now I'm like, God, I've never, and do you know where I saw the love of Christ? I saw it in Debbie. I saw someone love me when she had no reason to love me. We joke all the time. You guys see me now, but I have not really seen anyone come in lately how jacked up I was. Like for real, physically, sores all over my body, mentally, couldn't put a sentence together, just a stinking train wreck. I'm the girl that none of you would have wanted in the house because I was so fried in my brain. And yet I in desperation chose Jesus, and Debbie was not afraid to answer my phone calls, to walk alongside of me, to show me, to love me. And I thought, why would this woman love me? And she loved me with Christ's love. And so now all I want to do is show you that, because I'm watching some of you who even claim to know Jesus and your vision's obscured. You don't really see him, right? And some of you are new, but it's like, let's start to let the light of Christ shine. And he knows that you're broken. That's why he says, you know what lives in you is this. You've got the excellent power in a cracked pot in an earthen vessel. You don't put your most treasured things. I've got some treasured items, right? Clay pots were like the stupidest thing. Like they were the cheapest things. So you wouldn't take your valuable, I don't take my wedding rings and stick them in like a dirt box. But that's what Jesus has done. He's taken the most amazing thing, the power and the love of Christ, and he's put it in you. An earthen vessel that's pretty broken. And so it's the excellency of his power that shines through you. So I don't know, I really, even today in the Psalm, if you read it, the Lord can blind the enemy with the light and the power of Christ that's in you. But it's going to take some work, right? It's going to take you going, God, everything in me thinks and feels this, but your word says this. I'm going to only believe what you say. And when I can't believe it myself, because some of you got to start talking to yourselves because you know the word. I got to remind myself, but then go talk to one of us and we'll remind you of the truth. And then you're going to have to go, God, I want to believe this instead of what I think or feel right now. Right. So it was so powerful today. There was so much in here. I would ask myself some questions. What blinds me? If you don't ask yourself, what's obscuring my view, God, of you, the truth? Because Satan will try everything he can, right? And at some point, and it took me a long time, but I'm like, that's an attack of the enemy. That is not true. You have said this, right? And she talked about battle verses. If you want to change, you're going to start choosing to listen to what he says and speak to yourself like David. Why are you cast down, soul? Here's what the word of God says. Here's what I think. Here's what your word says. And watch it change. But anyway, I just got real super, we've got this love, and I know some of you are pretty sad, it's pretty broken, pretty hurt, and you want to be loved so desperately, especially as women. That's our greatest need, right? And we look to all these other things, and Satan puts these fake counterfeit love things in front of us, right? And even, there's nothing wrong with the love of a parent or the love of a friend, or a love of a husband or a relationship. But I love my husband, but he doesn't fill my soul. Only the love of Christ can do that. Okay. So you've got this love trying to pursue you, but ask God, is something obstructing my view? Am I believing some lies that are keeping me from knowing the truth? Because all the things she said, man, it was powerful, because then you're not going to have freedom. And if he knows that every time he tells you that you want to kill yourself, or that you don't belong here, or that you're a piece of crap, or that you should be ashamed, or that you'll never be any different than you used to be, or that you should be afraid of everything in the future, if he knows that that works, guess what he's going to do? He's going to keep doing it, right? If he knows that you're just going to believe what he says. And so I want to encourage you to look up, look in here, stop looking at this, stop looking at this, right? And get people to come alongside of you. And then if you are going to look at this, or this, or this, look at it through the lens of this, right? Does that make sense? And please, if you're sitting here, and I can't tell you this enough, it's because the God of the universe, saw you in your brokenness, in your deception, in your pain, and in your fear, and said, I want to help her know truth. Because if she could truly know me and know how much I love her and know truth, maybe she would choose me and choose to trust me instead of what she thinks. Can I ask you a question? Have you ever had a wrong perception about something? Have you ever been wrong in your judgment of something? Has your thinking ever been wrong? Has your feelings ever been off? Has God lied to you yet? Can God lie? Right? So why would I trust this that has deceived me, lied to me, right? Or instead of this, right? I had to ask myself those questions when I was new in the Lord. And I just want to challenge you, like, because you can start doing this. Okay, wait, God, is that your voice? She took you there. Whose voice is that? God, is that a truth? God, here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm thinking. But what do you say about me? And you should have some of those truths. That's what Victory Over Darkness does when you read that book. It tells you how to replace the lies with the truths. It's not just a book you got to get through here. It's a really powerful tool that God can use to help you to retrain your mind to only believe God. All right, there's my, sorry, I just got super passionate this morning because God just spoke to my heart. I wrote a bunch of your names down. I prayed for some veils to get removed because I see them. And you've only been here a little while. I can see veils, things that obstruct your view from seeing Jesus clearly, things that God or Satan uses to obstruct your view of Christ and to blind you. So there's your study. Love you guys. Let me stop.